Hello and welcome to Nice to Meet You, a place where we want to strengthen our relationships in the industry by highlighting others and what they're doing in business. My name is Denise, and today my guest is Karan Nijhawan. Hi, Karan. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yay, me too, because especially viewers, just in case you don't know, we're actually good friends as well. So this should be a lot of fun. We match the energy. So the energy is like on 10 for both of us right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that it's only gonna be like 10 minutes because we could talk for like 5 hours.
Right? I know. Hey, let's just see what happens. Maybe they'll get a little longer interview. Well, let's start right in. Thank you for coming on and talking. And again, like I said, we want to highlight what you're doing so people kind of get to know you and what's going on. So, with that being said, let me start right away and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, grew up in a small town, moved to a big city, the classic story that everyone wants, and realized that even in big cities, it's hard to discover who you are. And I stumbled upon dentistry like 3 years ago, and honestly, my business coach at the time was like, "You should niche," which is what every business owner hates to hear because you want to help everyone. And
Right.
to be honest, I found a group of people that were very successful on paper but very empty inside through their feelings, through their passions, through their emotions, through their own self achievements. I
Mhm.
stumbled upon this amazing industry of dentistry where people were so smart and were crushing it professionally, but inside felt the polar opposite. So I started creating environments where people could express themselves, be more of who they are, monetize their gifts, and somehow became this guy called the retreats guy within dentistry that essentially began teaching people in dentistry how to monetize their passions using very simple life events. There's so much I could share, but I feel like that's probably a good place for me to.
Did you pick, tell me this, did you pick the name The Retreats Guy, or how did that, you said you became the retreat guy. So was this something you were kind of stumbling on to have that name, or did that
Well,
happen like in the middle? Tell me a little bit about
I've
that.
been I've been doing events since 2016 because I
Okay.
found that a lot of networking events were so backwards and so transactional, where everyone cared about like the business side of who they were meeting. But you're like me; it's like we don't do business with people unless we know, like, and trust them,
Right.
and that's a lot more than just business. Like we have to vibe energetically and as a person before we ever do business together. But
Definitely.
why do most traditional events focus on the professional and not on the personal? So I
It's
started
true.
creating environments where the majority of the conversations were about the personal and like 5-10% were about the professional. So I started creating these dinner parties that essentially felt like group therapy, is what I started hearing from my participants. And after hosting hundreds of these dinner parties all over the world, I realized that the conversations at dinner were about life, suicide, depression, marital
Mhm.
problems, money problems, porn problems, sex problems, self belief problems, like real stuff that we all struggle with. And
Right.
dinner by dinner started to build this brand as a guy who brought people together. And then one day someone said, "Hey, would you ever teach us how to do events?" And I've always loved the word retreats. And someone said, "Well, there's a guy in travel called the Points Guy who teaches you how to optimize your travel points. What if you became the retreats guy?" And I was like, "Sure." Because I'm the type of guy where, like, as soon as an idea hits, I bring it to life right away.
Yeah.
It's one of my superpowers. And just started hosting these retreats. And the one thing I can tell you is, like, something I think about a lot is like my last day on earth.
Yeah.
And time is limited for all of us. And there's this famous nurse who was in palliative care. And as people were about to take their last breath, she wrote a summary of the top 5 regrets of the dying. So I'm like, well, if that's going to be me one day, why don't I just start living like that now? And one of the top 5 regrets of the dying was, I wish I'd had the life to live true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
I love
So
that.
from
Love,
that moment,
love it.
and the other ones, by the way, were: number two was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number three was, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Number
Mhm.
four was, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. And number five was, I wish I'd let myself be happier. And I thought, wow, all five of these, like, people in dentistry are amazing, but they're struggling with all five of these. So I
Yes.
started creating environments where people would not have those regrets.
I love it because, I teach culture. So on this point, we're completely aligned. I feel like on some of these points, we're 100% aligned. And it's very true because you come across people, not just in our industry, not just because I work outside of dentistry as well, but just human beings where we get so caught up in the rat race of work, 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 and we forget to live. So it's that saying, do you live to work or do you work to live? And then when it's time to say, hey, let me enjoy my life, you're old or you're sick or things have happened, but instead of living like in the present. I think when we first met, we talked about a book, The Power of Now, and it's by Eckhart Tolle. And it's one of the books that I really love because he really touches on learning from our past, preparing for our future, but living now, like right now, we're recording this moment will never happen again. This is real, this is where we are, this is what's happening. So if we're both thinking about what we're going to do in an hour, or if we're thinking about, you said you were on a mastermind call, I took a phone call, what was going on with that call, we're actually missing the opportunity now. So what I'm hearing is that by taking these retreats and getting these group of people together, you're helping them kind of discover exactly what he says, living in their now. Because isn't your cup say now and your shirt say now? And
Yeah, it's my wife Brandy created this brand for me called Now, and it looks like a digital alarm clock where the only
right.
time on this clock is said NOW.
Yes.
Now, like that's what it says. And you're absolutely right. I think oftentimes we're doing so much of our life on autopilot
Mhm.
subconsciously. We're driving to work, we're drinking coffee without even thinking about it. We're talking to patients or prospects without thinking about it. We're watching a movie while we're on our phone. So much of life is on autopilot, but
Yes.
it's hard to be on autopilot when someone's like, all right, we're going surfing today, or hey, we're about to ride ATVs, or we're about to, do something that stretches them and makes them actually put their phone away and just
Right.
experience life for all that it has. So I just believe that there's people are not experiencing many of those moments in their lifetime. And then they unfortunately live 3 weeks a year, this epic life, and then return to 49 weeks of mediocrity. And I just
Yes.
think that's so backwards.
Yes, it's true. I go to hypnotherapy. My hypnotherapist is also a success coach, and he's been really instrumental in really pushing me out of my comfort zone and understanding that most people, you mentioned, you touched on something about autopilot. It's actually they're walking around in hypnosis. They're in hypnosis. It's that time when you get home and you're like, I don't remember driving home. You're in a state of hypnosis. And the problem with that is that hypnosis is good when you need it to relax, to get your vision, to break through that subconscious. But when you have people that are just living their life day by day by day in hypnosis, they're not getting anything done. So I really love what you're doing. And I think it's very powerful and I believe it's needed. So if you had to say what inspired you to do this, I know there's that aspect of seeing that you can help people and get them where they need to be. But personally, what made you say or inspired you to say, I need to inspire others?
Partially, I think it was growing up in an Indian culture household where the women of the house never had a voice.
Mhm.
And like most kids, I would imagine, or most adults now, like we saw our kids fighting growing up. At least I did. Like I saw my parents fighting
Mhm.
while I was a kid, and I noticed that every time my parents would argue or fight, being a kid in the house, I would like poke my face out, hoping that hey, if they just see me, they'll stop arguing for a moment. And sure enough, that's exactly what would happen whenever someone would argue, and that would the same would be in my professional life. I see two colleagues arguing, I just kind of poke my face out and they would stop arguing. It's like
Yeah.
I think people want to be seen. And in some cultures, India in particular, especially like in the 40s, like when my grandpa got married, like women didn't have a voice. So
Right.
I started noticing that most people at events also didn't have a voice. There'd be like two people at an event running the entire event, and like 100 or 500 people who were kind of silent, if you will. So these dinners turned into opportunities for people to have a voice. Oftentimes, for the first time in their life, all eyes were on them for once, and they're like, "Oh
Mhm.
my god, like look at me. I'm on stage metaphorically, and I've got the
Right.
microphone
Right.
metaphorically." So I think it came
I'm
from a
seen.
byproduct.
I'm seen. They're seen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
And for me, it just so happened that in my household, certain people were not seen. So
Right.
I thought, well, let me create events where everyone is seen.
I love that. That's like so perfect. Um, so with that, now that you're creating these events, you had this inspiration, you kind of came into the retreat guy, you came into the now with the help of your wife, creating that logo for you. You have this vision, you're like, okay, I can help people, I want to help people be seen, I want to do this through the retreats. I know that there's other things you do besides the retreats, you help them in other ways with their business, right? So if you had to say what it is that you're currently doing with all of that, to create some change in our industry. Maybe before we talk about the change you are creating, what is the change that you want to create? If you had to give me two or three things that were your top goal, like for instance, with me, I teach culture. So my goal when I work with a team, when I speak in an event, is to help them to understand that it's not about the business part. That will come if the proper culture is there. We connect as humans. Target has it dialed in. You go into Target, Target tells you what to buy. You don't tell Target. You're like, I'm gonna buy one thing. You come out with 10 things because you go, oh, I need this candle. And then you're like, oh God, there's a pillow right next to it. Oh wow, I need that. Oh wow, there's this, there's this. It's all set in a strategic way so that it draws you in. So what I teach is you have to draw people in. And then the business comes. That's my goal. What is your goal? Before you tell me what you are doing, what is your goal to change in our industry or in any industry?
Goal number one, I believe we are in a business right now which is lacking trust. So the first thing is building trust. And the fastest way to do that is actually stop doing what everyone else is doing. Stop making false claims online. Stop doing what everyone else is doing for marketing. Stop doing freebies and challenges. And like if you by default, if you do what the mass market does, by default, you are literally average. So how do you stand out? Well, you find ways to build trust. And one of the things I believe in is this rule called 7-11-4, which is a sales and marketing rule long before my time. But it says
Mhm.
in order for a customer to buy from you, three things must be true. Number one, they need to experience at least 7 hours of consumption time with your brand or your service. So helping, in my case, helping clients produce enough content that their content becomes binge worthy because people want to discover you, they want to consume you before they actually want to purchase. The second is 11. That is 11 different interactions. So people need back and forth interactions with you before they take you seriously as a brand. And the third is 4. They want to experience you across 4 different platforms. That could be
Love it.
social, it could be newsletter, it could be in-person speaking at events. So my
Mhm.
first goal is how do we increase the trust that people have in you without you having to do any more cold outreach? Like, let's use your current assets to build more trust. The second thing, that's a massive goal of mine, is just like we're in a attention deficit economy, is
Mhm.
I think people are in a focus deficient economy as well. So the second thing is installing bumpers. Like, when you go bowling, there's this
Yeah,
button where the bumpers come up
I
and
need
the
them.
bumpers just kind of stop you from like going in the gutter. I think humans need bumpers. Like humans need someone to put up these little things so that you can just go
I
ding,
love
ding, ding, and you can bounce off. And unfortunately, people just don't have bumpers in their life, so they're probably in the gutter in so many ways,
it.
but they're seeing some false progress, and the busyness and the productivityness is keeping them in this cycle. And then really, this my third goal, and this is because my mentors have taught me, is like, why can't we make quantum leaps? Like, why can't you
Mm,
5x your income instead of just doubling your income? Like, who says
right,
life has to be linear? And if there's one thing I know about business, it's like it does not have to be linear. Like, you can
right.
go from 100K a month to 150K a month. You can go from 5K a month to 50K a month. Like, you don't have to follow a series of linear progressions. I just don't believe that because I don't believe it to be true. But those would be my three things I would say: build trust,
Love it.
install bumpers, and quantum leaps.
And you're currently doing this in the industry by having the retreats, right? And training
Well,
these.
retreats, but also showing a lot of consultants in dentistry that they don't have to follow the typical path in order to get business.
Right,
Like, you don't have to go to all the events. You don't have to
right.
have a podcast necessarily. You don't have to write a book. Like, you don't have to do a lot of these things because I came into this industry not knowing a single person. And within like less than 6 months, I became what I would coin as like a local celebrity. I'm not trying to be famous to everyone. I'm trying to be famous to my family.
Right.
So I think just like knowing who you want to be famous for already is me putting up my bumpers.
Right.
And I also believe that like a lot of dental events are just boring. Let's be real. So I help people create events that are a little bit more out of the box, maybe a little bit more different, a little bit more transparent, a little bit more human and not just corporate and cookie cutter. So
Right.
I'm lucky enough that I work with people that feel that they're not fully expressing themselves because they see it as a weakness, where I believe it's their superpower.
Right. I love it. Where do you get that drive, man? You're always going.
Well, it's because I have spent so much of my life dimming my own light because that's what I thought was normal, and my environment, in terms of friends or professional, celebrated mediocrity. And if you,
True.
I
True.
recently in 2016, I heard you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And just last week, I heard, well, it's not necessarily you're the average of the five people you surround yourself with. You're the average of the five people that you have a commitment level of.
I like that.
So if your five people are not equally as committed as you, whether it be in fitness or love or your faith or your finances or whatever goals you're trying to achieve, it's not just that you're the average of the five people you listen to or the
Right,
five people you hang out with. It's the five
right,
people that you share a commitment with. And I
right.
think that a lot of people are a lot of this, a lot of
Mhm.
talk about what they're going to do one day. And like you
Right.
said, the day we have is now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just
I love it. I love it.
actively avoid some of those environments.
No, I love it, and I see in our future that we will be working together, because I believe a lot of things I do are outside of the box. Most of the things I've walked my own trail and not done a lot of the traditional things because I feel like you, if someone's doing it this way, but they had to start before they did it. So why, and I've had a lot of people in my life say, you have to do it this way or it's not going to work. And I've done the opposite and stayed true and it's working. So I really feel that you're onto something and I think that it is needed. And you do work with outside of dental, right? So that if someone's watching,
Yep, I do. And here's the thing, it's like business problems are typically just personal problems.
mhm,
So if we can figure out what's going on personally, the professional life kind of takes care of itself. But I think too many people have their heads so buried into their business that they don't take time to work on themselves as humans. And I
yes.
just think that equation needs to be flipped.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, well, thank you for coming on and telling us a little bit about what you do. There is definitely a need for this in our industry and outside of the industry. And like I said, in the future, I see us collaborating. Boy, I don't know if everybody's ready for all that. We'll come in like gangbusters.
Like you said, there's only one moment, right?
It's gonna happen. Stay tuned, you guys, it will happen. So, thank you for coming on. Thank you. If anyone wants to, reach out and find you, I will have links all over that they can find you and get in touch with you. And for everyone else, remember to stay in the now, and until next time, make it happen.